So welcome, let's get started. The bad news is that this is not a presentation, it's a workshop, so you all have to work at some point today. The idea is the following. We have a lot of data space people that know a lot about data spaces and how to put data to use, but there is also a lot of companies, especially small and medium enterprises, that we need to get to a point where they do understand how they act in value chains. And I had a discussion yesterday with Alain from Airbus and Sandra, when we have a high-level process and they understand how it works, but when you tickle down, there is tiers going down, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, where at some point you hit companies that never thought about how their business is actually translated into data. And that's what we wanted to show you today. It's three parts. First, we asked the ecosystems to give us the top 3 priorities they have for the next 24 months. And we did not ask for data, we asked for priorities. Then we will have a quick use case because Frederick on our team had a company quite a while ago where they built a data space in 2012. And the problem was in 2012, the word data space didn't exist. But it's very simple to understand. And then I will show you a quick exercise that we want to do together. So the top priorities, we started with agriculture, was automation of digital field book and use of AI to analyze data. That's especially coming from Spain because there is this digital field book. Reduction in fertilizer and water use, and disease preventions and species adaptation to climate change. These are the top priorities. Then on tourism, interoperability with other data spaces, renting or mobility during visits, access to health information during visits, and local food for low emissions. So it's a schema that goes through. Sustainability is always a topic, and people start to understand that ecosystems are related to each other. It's not a standalone ecosystem. Then on mobility, ramp up and production. Aerospace, sorry, ramp up production because fortunately Airbus has sold so many planes that they need to be faster. Regulation overload, the decarbonation and the supply chain. Those are the top priorities. And mobility, sustainability, this ESR reporting, infrastructure update, talking about IoT and sensors, and modality, where you have different means of transportation in one journey. And finally, manufacturing is about digital product paths, global carbon footprint, and competitiveness. So these are the topics, and what we are going to do with that is we will then go in smaller groups and try to work out a process. And I asked the stream leads to think about it, a process in a certain method that helps you to understand how you can actually support with data those priorities. And with that, I would hand over to you.
Thank you. Well, I want to introduce you a brief example from real life, how to translate your business value chain into data and how to benefit from it from a time where data spaces or the concept of data spaces didn't exist. I started my own company in 2012 in the road construction sector because I have a background in business administration and supply chain management and started in the construction industry. Learned a lot throughout over Europe and realized that some of the processes going on there could be perfectly supported by digital tools, software and mobile devices. And I want to give you an example from the road construction industry because that seems very simple, at least at the beginning. First step in road construction is material production. Then you have transportation. Then you have the construction site itself, where the material is paved. And finally, last step is compaction. So it looks pretty simple. Probably you ask yourself, what should be digitized there or why at all? The challenge is that the whole process and everything behind it, at least 10 years ago and probably still today, is done manually, analog, and usually not by one company. With regular size projects, you have several production sites involved from different companies. You have several transportation companies involved. And depending on the size of the construction site, you have either one construction company or several. And the same with compaction. And the whole process, I know you love traffic jams on the road and often wonder, why is there a roadblock but there is no one working? Because it's actually a very complex just-in-sequence process, which you probably did not know now. And therefore we saw a lot of potentials to improve. And the involvement of these different companies and therefore conflicting objectives, because the production sites usually they want to produce linear maximum amount, or let's say 90% of production capacity for 12 hours a day, which is not realistic because construction sites usually have a non-linear demand. Transportation companies want to sell their trucks and drivers ideally the whole day, which is also not realistic because of the linear or non-linear demand. And the construction site itself thinks, hey, everyone is serving me, so I'm saying what has to be done. And the compacting in the end is about, let's say, the final quality of the road. And therefore we have different dependencies and challenges, and you first need to think of them. And the main problem here is, and probably many other industries, that planning is based on experience and long time averages, which is true for statistics. But do you know any woman having 1.3 kids? In average, a European woman has 1.3 kids. I don't know a single one, thank God. So you see, in every single project, average is just wrong. Sometimes pretty close, but still probably not right. And there are also other dependencies and influences, especially when it comes to outdoor construction sites, whether when you have transportation involved, or just in sequence or just in time transportation, traffic can be an issue, and as I said before, the non-linear demand. What does that lead to? So this leads to permanent fluctuations in the volumes needed, in the resources needed, and that has impact on costs, time, execution, and when it comes to road construction, and as I said, especially compaction, the last step is about the quality of the road in the end. It's a big quality issue, and then in the end it means the road maybe does not last 8 to 10 years, but maybe only 4 to 5 years. And what that means, I think you can imagine yourself. So what did we do? We looked at every single process step and tried to describe the relevant things behind that with data. For the production side, that means we need to know the demand for production. Not linear or not a statistic average, but the real-time demand per hour or per half an hour. That has effects on the transportation capacity needed. Then there are probably, when you go on the road, you sometimes experienced not every surface is the same. There are actually hundreds of different recipes for asphalt mixtures, depending on the type of road, depending on the type of cars going there, on the traffic and so on. And many other attributes we described as data and analyzed the processes in the back on only the relevant criteria and attributes and on their dependencies. And then you suddenly realize it's really complex, because first we did not think, well, the temperature of the asphalt is also important. So when a truck is going 30 minutes, it's probably fine. When the truck is stuck in the traffic jam and takes 1.5 hours, you get a quality issue because the temperature of the product is too low, or there needs to be more compaction and so on. So therefore we created or started to create a real digital twin. And that's what we did for all the process steps described before. And these are just examples. There are many, many more. In the end, it was a very complex model where we were able to show all the dependencies and all the relevant attributes in one model and made them interactive. So if just one value changed, having an impact on something else, the whole project plan was updated. And that is only possible not when you have a digital twin for planning, but even more important, you need that digital twin through the realization and real-time data on all the relevant attributes shown here. And now you think yourself probably, okay, why should the parties share that data? Why should they start collecting additional data and share it for free? Or maybe to partners they are not regularly working together. Well, in the end, it's not new data at all. It exists, and it existed 50 years ago as well. And it is already shared, and it was shared 50 years ago as well. But not digitally and not in real time. It was shared through delivery notes, it was shared through paper planning, it was shared usually via phone. Hey, I'm in the traffic jam, I'm gonna be probably late. Then someone else is calling the other one on the production side, and then it's like half an hour later and the information you just shared is not true anymore. So the first thing was that most of the companies were afraid of sharing the data, and we said, hey, you're already doing with your delivery note. You're sharing when the truck has been loaded, what is the transportation company, what type of material, the amount of the material, the temperature of the mixture, and actually everything else, even with the license plate and the driver and whatever. So all the data is already shared, but still they were afraid of sharing it in real time, because then they would become like kind of transparent. And I think, but they were transparent in the end as well, except there was a huge analog and manual amount. Just one simple example before I come to the solution. Let's stay with this delivery node of the truck. The production side loads the truck and prints the delivery note. Sometimes they even have to type in manually the license plate and the type of material and the amount loaded. For some sites it's already digitized and it automatically is printed. The driver takes 4 copies of this delivery note, goes to the construction site, hands 1 copy over to the leader of the site, signs it, 1 he keeps himself. He collects it at the construction site, and if the construction site is going on for days maybe, or the leader of the site is only in the office on Fridays, he collects all the delivery notes for the whole week. Then he drops them in the office, and in the office someone starts looking at the delivery notes and typing them in again to their ERP system or Excel or whatever. Taking a lot of time. They don't even know, did they probably, or maybe lose one of the delivery notes or even more. There is a huge risk of typing errors and whatever. And based on that information, they are doing the aftermath of the projects. Late, probably not correct, with I don't know, maybe 90% of the real input, and then they start fighting with each other. No, I was on time. No, I did deliver more. No, I didn't use that much, and so on and so on. And by that, they are losing probably 30% of profit, just because it's inefficient and not digitally supported. And that's where we came up and said, hey, we have described the whole model. We also developed the technology in the background to connect the different process steps. Back then, we didn't have a technical compatibility kit. We had to develop APIs for every single more or less not every single company, but for at least many different ERP systems and so on. And suddenly kind of created a data space, or at least a data platform that was run by us. And then the big question came, hey, who actually is the orchestrator of that? And then said, well, we are running it, but at least one of you is owning or running the software and sharing the data, but what is if another party shares the data, and that where this topic of trust and sovereignty and so on came into play. And back then, we did not have a simple answer, so we just were like, compared to today, 10 or 15 years too early. But I don't want to tell you the rest of the story. In the end, we finally sold it, quite successful. It's still existing. It definitely developed and evolved. But that was like kind of first data space I came in touch with, and realized only years later that it actually should have been a data space, probably with an independent orchestrator, and the best orchestrator for such things would be the public hand, because they are usually financing infrastructure buildings or in infrastructure constructions. 99% of infrastructure is financed by public money, and they are usually also the ones who surrender the tenders, yeah. So they have the biggest interest in being the orchestrator, being the whole process transparent, and again get the real info on real costs, and especially on that the quality of the end product, in that case the road, is ensured. So, and now we try to make the link somehow. I already mentioned it. This, where Gaia-X can support, it's about, first of all, the trust, because you usually always experience new partners or new participants in such a supply chain, even in such a simple supply chain. And especially the construction industry, I think it's still the least digitized industry in the world. They cannot develop their frameworks themselves. They cannot run the things themselves, because they just have totally other interests and other expertise. And therefore, they would need such a thing as Gaia-X is developing or has developed, relying on a decentralized model, relying on technical interoperability, trust and sovereignty, and leaving them only the task, which is still not easy, to digitize the process or describe it with data, and to align on ecosystem-specific rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. And now we promised it's a workshop. So we have those industry leads. So we're doing aerospace with Sandra, agriculture with Paki, Steffen, mobility and smart city with Steffen. What else do we have? Industry is, I will do industry because Thomas had to leave. And tourism. Yeah, Victor. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, it's not important. I mean, it's helpful if you go to the right industry, when we now go into groups. But you can join anyway, because it's the mindset and the methodology that I want you to experience as a starting point. And what we want to do is we do the same thing like we just saw with this paving thing. We've prepared for you flip charts that have 4 boxes like this. Abstract a process, make it really simple. A process that is related to your priorities, and say what's the name of that process step. In our example, I don't know, paving or production. And then try to identify fields that you need to know as an input. So when you probably get something into the warehouse, what is important, from where it comes, how heavy it is, I don't know. So think about what you need to know at that step. And then think about what is the source of that information today? Is it a delivery node? Do you already get it electronically? Do you miss it? You know, just try to fill that out real quick, real easy. We're gonna do 15 minutes for it. If you do 1, 2, 3, or all 4, it doesn't matter. Just start the thinking process on how can I describe and translate my existing business process into data, because that's what you need to do before you do data spaces, because everything else is solved, guys. We have data space as a service. You can use any orchestrator, it works. This is the problem, and many people start working on data spaces by thinking about technology, but that's wrong. You need to think about what you want to do first, because technology is the least exciting part. So I think we just use those tables that we have to do the groups. We have pens, we have the prepared flip charts. I ask the leads to pick a table, and the rest just join them as you wish. And at the end, we will present 1 or 2 of those charts, and then we take it from there, and Alberto will tell you how we're going to support you following this workshop. Let's wrap this up, please. No, that doesn't matter. It is exactly about to start to think about it. That's what I wanted to achieve here. Let's stop here. Kannst du mir das aufhängen, bitte? Okay, and we will present as many as possible. So please get back to your seats. Let's please stop the activity, because I would like to take a chance that you can see results that have been produced. And so I hope the exercise was interesting. It was really not to find the perfect solution and the perfect process description. What this was about is really to start your thinking in data. And I hope we can have a brief presentation of what people thought, because I know Airbus, as usually, didn't follow the rules and made something different, but it's very useful. As always. No, but it's nice because it's a different way of looking at it, because what we wanted you to do is the first step. What they did is actually already step 2. Wolfgang, would you please present the manufacturing thoughts we had?
Thank you, Roland. Yeah, we did a rough picture of the processes in manufacturing, simplifying, of course, for the purpose of achieving the goals of this workshop. So we distinguish in 4 different sub-steps. This is procurement and delivery of the supply and the raw materials. Then we have the production process as such, as the next step. We have the quality control and interim storage processes with confectioning for customers, and then we have the final distribution. So let's go through the different data sets step by step. Procurement and delivery of raw materials and supply materials. We are looking at material data. We are looking at sizes of materials, weight of materials, quantities, other properties. Also sustainability information, for example, CO2 footprint will be very relevant in the future. And there are sources for data like supply databases, letters in which materials or supplies get offered, material databases, but also MES systems, manufacturing execution systems, ERP systems in use. As I said, it was simplified, so there's much more behind it. So let's go to step 2, the production process as such, so the combination of the different materials plus the human factors. So we have CAD data, we have PPS data, production planning data, we have machine data, machine capacity, for example. We have capacity planning data, we have shift planning data, and so on and so on. This can be a very, very long list. And the sources, again, we have machine utilization databases. We are talking about production planning data. We are talking about the planned production data. We are talking about the achieved production data. Yeah, so to have a comparison and to find reasons why waste is produced, scrap is produced, or whatsoever. And we have critical information like defect information and so on and so on. And sensors as sources for data. The heat of the environment, shaking grounds for the machines and so on. Then we have the quality assurance and the confectioning process. So goods that are being produced here are going into storage houses. There are quality assurance processes in between. We have again the CAD data. We have information about colors, about weights, about properties, storage information where things have to be stored, have to go already first customer information, and so on, which supports in the confectioning. And we have again different warehouse and distribution systems that store the data. We have logistic information systems. We have CRM systems where we get the data from, and we have forms. Yeah, Excel forms that are printed out. And then the last step is the final distribution to the customer. So there we talk about client information, location information, loading capacity and so on, which are stored in CRM systems, logistic databases, also in forms which are printed out and in MAS, manufacturing execution systems. That's it. Thank you.
Danke, Wolfgang. Can we, Sandra, would you go next? And I hope we can do then Paki so that we at least saw 3.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. As Roland just mentioned, we did it a little bit different, but basically out of the 3 priorities mentioned before, we took the use case of how to support the ramp up of our supply chain. Because if we are not accompanied by the whole ecosystem, we cannot make it. So basically today, as I mentioned yesterday, we are working with roughly 10,000 suppliers, but obviously we are not working directly interfacing with the 10,000. So we work with what we call tier 1 suppliers, but these tier 1 providers have their own suppliers. What for us is tier 2. These tier 2 have their own, and the chain goes on until tier N. This N can be up to 7, so the complexity is very, very high. Today, the pain point we have, or what we're trying to solve here, is to have going from the current discontinued digital supply chain, because today we only have visibility and control, let's say, from our tier 1 suppliers in terms of, for example, compliance, if it's validated, not validated, and the data. And we are completely blind here. And this is what we're trying to achieve with the aerospace and space data space called the Gaia-X, really to onboard all these suppliers in the data space, so we can share the data and visibility through multi-tier suppliers. This is a little bit in a nutshell. Okay. Sorry?
That was fast.
We see that every sector have a different problem. So for them, the problem is that they are blind in the second tier, for example. Here we have also another. We don't have phases, because in agriculture you have one phase in the, especially if you the use case we have chosen. I come from South Spain, the biggest desert in Europe. So the use case we have taken is water reduction, and water reduction for the plant. So therefore we have taken the different, not phases, but the different type of information. For example, we will need to have rain forecast or temperature forecast. So weather forecast, I would say. We will need to know also the humidity of the soil. We will need to know also the water consumption, the real water consumption, the production yield, the type of crop, and the crop planning, and the selling forecast. when I need to sell. Right, and we have seen the different information. For example, the weather forecasting here in Spain, probably we will use AEMET. In Germany, we will use the Deutsche Wetter. So we will have the official. In Valencia region, I have done by the way, I have done a study a few months ago, and the probability to have the right data are 10% more or less. So that's really very difficult to have it. So the humidity, typically we have, if we are in a greenhouse, like in Andalusia, for example, we will have sensors. But there are other type of information. For example, you have trees, like orange trees or whatever. You can use satellite, because depending on the color, you could know what is the humidity of the trees, for example. Or even drones. Here in Spain, it's quite typical to use drone for everything. Water consumption, that was a good tip, because there is the water that you use and the water that you consume, because in agriculture it's also very typical the loss of water in the tubes. And also the production you will have in the field book about the type of crop. The seed provider are very important. Seed provider have a lot of information. They will give to the agriculture, and at the end they will go also to the field book. And after, for the planning, you will have all the information written in the exploitation book. About the selling forecast, we don't have officially. Everybody asks about it, but typically the people, they don't have the selling forecast. At the end of the day, we will need not so many data, but we will need good data. That is weather agency data, sensor or satellite, water meters, field book, and exploitation book. But many things are still missing that we will need, like exploitation forecast, for example, selling forecast. And that is the typical thing that the people are asking now. But the data, we could have it. The problem is to have good data and quality data.
Okay, thank you, Paki. So with this, we're at the end of this little workshop. I hope you had quite some fun in the exercise and understand where we're going. And as I said at the beginning, this is a starting point. So I'm handing over to Alberto to basically show you how we go from here, because that should not be the end. It should be the start of a conversation where you can take place as verticals.
Thank you, Roland. So I'm Alberto, and so I'm the co-chair of the Data Spaces Business Committee. And a lot of times, Sandra yesterday was asking me, what exactly is that committee in relation to? Sorry, that's not what I guess. No, two maybe. There you go. So what does the committee do as opposed to the technical committee or the policy rules? If I had to really simplify, the technical architecture in Gaia-X is about, and this is an oversimplification, how you really distribute the concept of trust. It's agnostic to rules to some extent. Obviously, you have to develop that architecture, taking into account what you're going to be doing, but it's agnostic to the actual trust of what you are. And then the policy rules committee, what it does is it actually discusses policy rules. We started with the cloud ones because those were kind of the quote-unquote European cloud rules, right? It's difficult to argue against, having a contractual framework for the cloud. It's difficult to argue against GDPR. In fact, it's illegal to argue against GDPR, right? But then we have a third committee, which I wish I had put on the slide on the other bit, which is the Data and Services Business Committee, and that's the one that I'm co-leading with Thomas from Siemens. Now, we don't have from that committee an official deliverable, so there's not part of the standard of Gaia-X when it comes to the architecture, which is the first thing you're seeing, the Gaia-X architecture, the Identity and Credentials and Access Manager document, the Data Exchange document. Those are actual technical rules you need to follow. Or the policy rules, the labels and the policies that are contained within the labels. What we do from the DSBC is try to put it into practice. How? Through projects. Of what kind? Literally these ones, right? And so when I try to simplify what Gaia-X is, so Gaia-X is not about data spaces. We don't build data spaces. What we do is we provide a critical aspect if you want to build a data space, which is how do you ensure trust across distributed owners of distributed resources? In other words, if and as you saw here in the example, I'm not sure about this one in particular, but probably two, many of these data sources don't come from the same owner of the data source. And this is the whole concept of federated data exchange. And Gaia-X works on that, because basically what we provide with the technical committees, an architecture and a set of rules in which you need to describe your digital resources. So for example, if you had to define the rain forecast, we don't deal with the semantics of the rain forecast, but we deal with the semantics of who owns that report, what's the validity, what are the rights, usage rights over that report. And then that's exactly how you get into the enforcement of data exchange policies. Because, you know, if you have a technical architecture that allows you to define it, and then you actually go and define the data exchange policies, well, the owner of the rain forecast might say, you know, I'm interested in this, I'm happy to lend it for this particular use case. Maybe this is not a good example because typically it's a meteorological national agency, it's publicly open. But definitely the type crop, the crop type, that will definitely be sensitive and commercially important information, right? However, as we're seeing, it's of extreme value. And as Frederick rightly pointed out, is that actually companies already do share this information. They just do it in a very inefficient way. And sometimes past the time, you know, information has a timestamp too. The value of information lowers as time goes, eventually becomes useless, right? If you're telling me what happened in 1780, I don't care, it's 300 years ago. To summarize, what we try to do from the Data and Services Business Committee is say, look, we have an architecture done by the technical team and the members that are part of those working groups. We have some labels, and we have technology or concepts for how to enforce data exchange policies. If you were yesterday here listening to Klaus Otradovic, who is the chair of the technical committee, he described what to me is a game changer in terms of Gaia-X, which is literally say, look, we give you the language, you bring your own rules, and you apply those rules. Well, guess what those rules are? Who gets to use these? Who gets to use these? How? The validity. Hey, even you could add with geographic and domain extensions. They all run on top of the clearinghouse, but the actual rules and the business value of it needs to be defined by the use case, the people that build the use case, right? So Victor at the end, the tall Dutch-Irish guy, he runs the ecosystems. The ecosystem sounding board is a sounding board that we have within the DSBC, the Data Services Business Committee, and it's actually split across different ecosystems, different domains and industries. Precisely, the kind of some of the new things that we will be publishing soon is a white paper on tourism. And what we try to do, and it's still at the very early stages, is look, what are some of the pressing issues you have in tourism? You know, in that white paper, we don't get to the specifics of this. Here, we were actually looking at two specific use cases, how you make sure that your tourist has access to an electric vehicle when you're in a destination, and also how do you have access to health information related to the health of the tourism. That's very specific. But this white paper, for example, what it did is try to identify you know, what are some of the pressing issues in tourism when it comes to data? And then it was quite easy to map all these things on top of that, right? From a conceptual perspective. The next step, where I think it's real the value, is to actually take it and say, look, I plan on using this clearinghouse, or these are some of the rules that I can implement. And what eventually, what basically that allows is to have an extremely flexible framework that you can reuse for this use case, these are the use case, all the possible use cases. And that's really where the value in Gaia-X lies and why it was designed that way. We don't do data spaces because we provide a technical bit and a compliance bit for how to provide trust to data spaces. But the reality is those data spaces will keep evolving and more use cases will come. And that's why for us, having the flexibility was critical. So what do we do? And now there will be a session try to explain what the value of Gaia-X, of the European Association, but essentially we defined that architecture, we've already defined some labels, but more needs to come in the sense of how you do data exchange policies and data usage policies. But critically, by adopting the standard, you're essentially future-proofing, because as long as that standard keeps getting more and more used, the value of the network, interconnected network, continues growing, right? And then we've also provided, and there's already a significant number of clearing houses. Now we're working on domain and geographic extensions, where to me, it's really where the value lies, you know? The cloud rules, they're useful if you're looking for infrastructure, but if what you're really looking is deploying on top of the infrastructure, you need to also deploy your own rules. And then we're, as you see, we're building an ecosystem, and yesterday Roland presented the certified advisors and orchestrators, which is critical to really helping SMEs and people who still may primarily be interested in hearing about this, because this is where the core business is, and they can live up to the ecosystem and the list of certified to actually get it to build. But in a summary, we will continue looking at things like this within the ecosystems in Gaia-X, and everybody's welcome to join. And you know, we hope that this gives a bit of a more practical perspective into what really is Gaia-X, you know. Thank you. Yeah.
Spoken about the use case. Do you think and also Gaia-X could support about the legal? I mean, if I put some data and I have an identity and I have a compliance, I have a how much responsible am I about my data? I'm thinking about IMET. You know that now in Spain we have a problem with the DANA, because IMET had said that they have given the forecast for the weather, but the people from the Valencia, they didn't look it. So and it was legal. There is a legal responsibility because they have given the data. I mean, could we use also clearinghouse for that? For the responsibility?
We essentially have a digitized system to be able to track how things work. So definitely, if you have a certain set of data services that are classified in a given way, and you build, again, a domain extension to say, hey, there's this rule, and I'm checking it with the different, then yeah, for sure. But Gaia will not give you that. That needs to be built with Gaia-X technology.
Mm-hmm. Because I think it's also very good also for you. I mean, for Airbus or so, to say, okay, people who go to my data space, who are you compliant, who are doing that, and they take also the responsibility of their data. I think it's a very, very important point of view. No.
Before Kai goes in, Kai is actually here. He's a very prominent player of the Gaia-X ecosystem, so he can provide some.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch exactly on your question. So who is liable for the data and the accuracy in this case, right? For this associated with each data service, you have terms and conditions, like Roland just mentioned, and the Gaia-X framework makes it mandatory that you publish and make those available associated with the data, and they will define for what you're liable, under what warranties and restrictions the data and also software services come. So that would be the place to look for it. And if you have any dispute with the authority, Gaia-X would fix that, because you would have a contract logging in place that you acquired the data under which terms and conditions at what point of time. So it really helps you to build a provenance chain, to have the liability question solved in an automated manner. So yes, strong yes, but the liability is on the data service
I think
provider.
it's one of the main points for the liability. I mean, we are seeing now in the, I mean, who are not Spanish, you don't know, but now the war in Spain is who was the guilty for the DANA. Not for the DANA, for the people died in the DANA. It was, the reaction was IMET, who has given the weather, or Valencia town, who didn't put the resource to solve it. But even for agriculture, they can put the seed information that we have spoken, the crop information. Okay, the information you have given me is good. My plantation is dying because you didn't give the good information. And for any other, for Airbus, maybe if they say, okay, all my raw material were okay because I have given the data, but after they have a problem, who is the responsibility? I mean, I think all the liability is very, very important to use the Gaia-X data spaces.
But it's still on the responsibility of the orchestrator to make sure that the terms and conditions accurately reflect the business process.
Yeah, of course.
One thing that is important, because Kai mentioned what the provider of data can put in the terms and conditions, but it's also the user. So with the system, it's also traceable that, in your case, the city of Valencia did obtain the data at a certain point in time. So everyone knows it is there. In general, I think the question whose fault was it a year ago is in any case wrong. The thing is, how can I have a system that helps preventing me of implementing something which is wrong, rather than figuring out there is a problem? And I had a discussion with Alain and Sandra yesterday, and then it takes me 6 months to figure out what went wrong. I think this is the bigger value, to understand upfront the data is there, you can consume the data, the data flows into this process, and this is how you're going to predict something, because that's the real value. I mean, that's also the difference between policymakers and Gaia-X. Every time when people cry, I think it's hilarious when you think about it. In Europe, people ask the policymaker to protect them from American hyperscalers. This is stupid. You should think about where you put your data before you put it there, and not ask for the policy help that you get a legal framework that you can sue them afterwards because the data is gone. So this is really, the value is, this is a proactive system. It's not meant to be a documentation system to figure out whose fault it was. It's a system that proactively helps you to do the right decisions. I think we're almost 10 minutes over. Thank you very much for your cooperation, for your activity here. I hope you had a little fun on doing more active things than just listening to presentation. Thanks for the orchestrators of the little workshops. And back to Paki.
Well, thank you.